There are various ways to reach the subconscious. The surface of the subconscious can be reached through mental talk. A little deeper level cannot be reached by mental talk, but it can be reached by mental images. The deepest level of the subconscious cannot even be reached by mental images, but it can be reached by body sensations. The way mindfulness deals with the subconscious is by setting up a feedback loop, which I've described in other segments, whereby at the level of body sensation, when the reptilian brain, which is essentially a body brain, a touch-feel brain, when the reptilian brain notices that when it interferes with the flow of body sensation, its own product, of course, that there is suffering, and when it stops interfering, that that there is the absence of suffering or fulfillment. The reptilian brain notices that, and it is changed in the classical Skinnerian mode. You train the animal the way you train an animal, with reward and punishment at the level of body sensation. So by putting yourself in an environment where not much is going on for a period of time, either the micro retreat of a daily sit or the macro retreat of taking a weekend or a week or 10 days or longer and going off and doing nothing but meditation, within that simplified environment, the deepest mind can unlearn its habit of fighting with itself. Essentially, what B.F. Skinner and the others in the behavioralist school proved was that if you want to train an animal, that animal has to be given rewards and punishments, and those rewards and punishments have to be immediate upon the behavior, and they have to be absolutely predictable. If they're random, then you won't get strong learning. And if there's a gap between the behavior and the reinforcing stimulus, then also there won't be strong learning. So in the simplified environment of a sit or a retreat, a situation is set up where the animal within us, the reptilian brain, can consistently and immediately be aware when it fights with itself, there is suffering, so that's the punishment. When it stops fighting with itself, there is fulfillment, that's the reward. The simplified environment of formal practice creates the situation where there is consistent and immediate reinforcing feedback. In the classical Skinnerian mode, now I know Skinner is sort of a dirty word in a sense because the behavioralists' influence at a certain period in the academic world led to ridiculous notions about the nature of humanity, okay? However, they did have some good points going for them. And it turns out, somewhat ironically, I think, that the most subtle and powerful spiritual path that I'm aware of, something that the Skinnerians would have been horrified by, which is the Buddhist experience, turns out that large parts of it are best explained by a Skinnerian model. But in this case, the behavior is not that the lizard is being trained to, or the mouse is being trained to press a bar or turn this way or that way in a maze. The lizard level of the human is being trained as a lizard is trained, but by a human who has intentionally set up that situation for themselves to train their lizard brain. The lizard brain is being trained into something incredibly subtle. The new behavior is not interfering with its own activity, which is to say that it's being trained into equanimity. The result, and this is where the Skinnerians would freak, which is sort of poetic justice. The result of that Skinnerian conditioning of the lizard brain is that ordinary experience becomes utterly spiritualized and becomes indeed a direct contact with one's spiritual self or one's spiritual source. So that whereas the Skinnerians would have, in their extreme form, denied that there even is a thing called subjective experience, it turns out that their model can be used to explain the deepest of all subjective experiences, which some people would say is the experience of God.